I'm Patricia McDonald, director of the Ulrich Museum, and so glad we have the core tribe who made it out this evening to start a program that will continue through the year of buzzworthy art talks. So Ulrich invests its hard-earned money to bring a number of significant nationally prominent people here to Wichita to come for talks, and we're starting that series this year with Anne Appleby, an artist that I've known for 10 years or so. Her work is so compelling. I just swoon in front of it, and I'm so proud that we were able to organize the exhibition of her work that Emily Stamey did a wonderful job with, and with the essay in the gallery guide, and we actually did a commission so that when this show disperses to different parts of the earth, we get to keep some of the work that you see in the gallery. So I am actually here just to welcome you, and it's actually Emily Stamey, our curator, who's going to give an introduction for Anne. So thank you for coming.
So Anne comes to us tonight from Montana, where she lives and works south of Helena in a town bracketed by forest. She's in the mountains. And that location is critically tied to her practice. A keen observer of the natural world, she lives deliberately in a place where she can be close to it. The exquisite paintings that Patricia was talking about that result from her study of trees and skies and flowers and lakes have won her prestigious awards from the Pollack-Krasner Foundation and the Louis Comfort Tiffany Foundation, as well as an ardent following both nationally and internationally. She has had solo museum exhibitions in her home state, as well as Idaho, California, and Washington. She has also had one-person shows in Germany and Italy. Her work can be found in such notable collections as the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, the Albright Knox Museum in New York, the General Mills Corporate Collection in Minnesota, and the world-renowned Panza Collection of minimalist and conceptual art in Switzerland. Most recently, as Patricia mentioned, her work has been added to our very own collection here at the Ulrich. We commissioned from her the large green, gray, and gold painting that is on the north wall of the Amsden Gallery, and that Anne has titled Wichita Elm. We are thrilled that beautiful painting will stay with us after the show closes, and we are delighted that we can have the artist here with us tonight. Please help me in welcoming Anne to Wichita.
Hello. Thanks for coming to listen to what I might have to say. I'm deeply honored. So tonight I want to talk about kind of how I got to where I am as a painter. This is the water lily pond, reflections of clouds on the water lily pond, painted by Claude Monet. And the reason why I chose this slide is I think it's, he was one of the first people to kind of break out of the Renaissance tradition of painting as a vignette or looking through a frame. And I consider this painting to be one of the first overall paintings. You can see how it just kind of burst from its perimeters. And that's really important to me, and I think it's important to a lot of modernist work and postmodernist work. So, and I love the painting. This is at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, and it's 6.5 feet by 42 feet. If you can't read centimeters, or figure out how to put it in. Oh, you already did that. This is Jackson Pollock, who's one of my favorite painters. And this is another large painting, and it also talks about that overallness of abstraction. And it talks a lot about energy. This is probably one of my favorite paintings in the entire universe, and it's, if you ever get to stand in front of it, you'll understand why. It has a very strong presence to it, and it's so energetic. And when I look at it, I think, why even bother trying to paint? Because it's such an awesome painting. And the Monet was 1920, and these Pollacks were 1950. So Pollock says this. And I think it's really important because I think no matter what time an artist lives, it's really important to bring either the language or what we know about art making to our present day circumstance, and for it to be actual and for it to be authentic and honest to our own experience. And I just wanted to include this quote because I think it really talks about that. This is Mark Rothko, and this was painted the same time that the Pollock paintings were painted. It's a totally different approach, but I think it once again, when you look at the image of it on the screen, it does nothing really compared to actually standing in front of it and what it emanates and the energy and presence that it has. This is another Rothko 8 years later. When I was in graduate school at the San Francisco Art Institute, I used to go to painting seminars or critiques where we'd each take turns bringing in our paintings, and then the class would look at them and usually tear us apart for what we were doing. And I had this teacher there, Sam DeKalian, who would, he'd put up a picture and he'd say, "Do you think this artist had an experience when they were making this, painting?" And we either say yes or no. And I think when a painter or any artist is really engaged in what they're doing and they're getting to the core of what it is they do and they're not imitating, there is an experience. And painters and artists in here know when that happens. That's what keeps us doing it. And when we kind of try to fake it, our audience can pick up on it as well. This is the Rothko Chapel in Houston, Texas, and it's an interdenominational place of worship. And Mark Rothko worked with the architect, and these are still there. They're installed there. And I like these because they're kind of conceptual in a way, and they're kind of, I like the serialness of them and the actuality, again, of these being really site-specific works. And a lot of these images that I'm showing tonight, you can't really even see them because of their actuality-ness or their actualness. Like this slide or this image. This is an Agnes Martin from 1974. And Agnes Martin painted her format for most of her life. She died in 2004 at, 86 was she, or 92 or something? Really old, had a long life, worked as a painter most of her life. And her format was basically 6 feet by 6 feet because she said she could put her arms around the canvas and actually move it, which makes great sense. I mean, it makes it human scale. It makes it practical to work with. And then when she got in her 80s, she said she changed to 5 by 5. Here's one, 2003, the year before she died, 5 by 5. And once again, you have to sit with these paintings in order to understand what they're about or to feel their presence. This is Robert Ryman, who his basic thing was just working with to see what paint could do, the way it could be manipulated. This is an early painting. And as we progress through these images, this one's pretty early. Like this one too, because it's a site-specific installation, so he's getting a little bit more conceptual in his thinking. This one, he's starting to really think about the way that the painting should be attached to the wall. He's considering not just the painting itself, but he's considering where it is and how it relates to its environment. This is Richard Diebenkorn. I love these paintings. I don't have the scale on here, but they're large. This is Richard Serra, the sculptor, who has a fabulous show. Is it still at the Met? It's down now. Yeah, it's beautiful. Where does it go? Into San Francisco? Yeah. This is Mara Wagner. Mara works with steel, Rust-Oleum on steel. So these are attached to the wall with magnets. This is a Bay Area painter, John Zurier. So I'm going to show you some of my work and talk about how I'm making paintings in 2011, how I got to where I am, and why I'm still pretty engaged in what I'm doing. I worked with a native artist, Eddie Barbeau, from about 1979 to his death in 1994. And he kind of nabbed me to be his painter. So I painted this shield, and we'd have discussions, because I went to art school and I knew I can render fairly well, believe it or not. And he would talk to me like, no, that looks, that is not a wolf, or that's not a turtle. You need to make the spirit of that animal in the drawing that you're making. You need to put the essence and the power of that animal, onto this shield. It's like, huh? But then I started thinking about it, and I started looking at a lot of the objects that he had, like drums and shields and, things that were holy things that had a lot of medicine or a lot of power to them. And sometimes it might just be taking some red ochre that he found, or someone had found, and just rubbing it into the rawhide. And that had spiritual significance, and that gave that object power. And I started really thinking about that a lot. And thinking about Jackson Pollock and Rothko, and trying to figure out, like, where does that essence, where does that power come from? What is that thing? So working with him was very influential, and I learned a lot. These are some Native American suitcases that I painted. The same time, I worked with some at a youth program at the Helena Indian Alliance in Helena, Montana, and the community wanted some murals, and I worked with 2 students, and we talked to people, and we talked about, what was going on, and talked to elders and stuff. And so we came up with these 4 directions murals that are still there. And what they talk about in the old time, which the South, is when the Creator gave the people the buffalo, which was their sustenance, and the tree of life was in bloom, and there was a direct connection between the Creator and the earth and the people that lived there. So the moon was full, everything was groovy. So we made that for the South. And then West, which is also autumn. South is summer, West is autumn. You can see, I'll go back to South. You can see the ring around the circle there is the hoop of nations is strong. And then we go into the autumn, into transformation, the time, the season that we're in right now. You can see the hoop has been broken. You can see the buffalo have become ghosts in the clouds. And now there's just a skull, the moon's waning, and the Indian man is cutting off his hair to conform to European society. This is north, and this is kind of like what a lot of tribes kind of predict, which is the time that we're in now. And it's, really finding our humility and finding out who we are and making that connection with the earth and with the Creator. And you can see the hoop of nations is starting to kind of shimmer and come back a little bit. And it's really a time of introspection, so that this would be the time of winter. And then we're supposed to move into east, new beginnings. And this is, the whole theme becomes a little bit more universal, that we realize that we're basically all one, and we're all sharing the same resources and the same space, basically. So I painted these in 1981, and then I went to graduate school in 1986 at the San Francisco Art Institute, and these are the 4 directions I painted there. So the white one is south, then the red one's west. These are also the first, quote, monochrome paintings I ever made. I dreamed about them because there was a gallery that students could, you could apply for a show. And you'll see there's a Diego Rivera painting in there. And anyway, I had this dream. I said, 4 directions, and I went in the room, and I dreamed the scale, I dreamed everything about them, and everything just totally worked. So I thought, oh, we have to do this. So I applied for to be in there, and they said, yeah, you could do it. There's Diego behind the north. There's the north and east, and then, of course, over on the wall where we are would be the south again. So we had a seminar in there, and my teacher said, Okay, you got everyone sitting in the middle of the room, because if you sat in the middle of the room, you could see three of them and you could definitely feel the presence of the fourth one behind you, or you could see the reflection of the fourth one behind you. He said, you've got us in the center of the room, what are you going to do next? And this is my thesis for my MFA, and this is called The Dancing Ground. And there are 12 of these panels, so there's 2 more walls of them, so that when you're in the center, you can see the entire installation. And the viewer actually activates these paintings, because when you walk in there into the room where they are, you can actually see yourself in them. And it's back to the idea of all life that has gone before sustains the life that we now know, because we become kind of, like gook, and we become soil. Our bodies do anyway. So that's another view of it. It was very hard to photograph it, because it kept shifting between red and green, which, by the way, is still a theme in my work. So this is basically Earth. And then I did sky. And this is the Blue List series. And one morning I was reading the newspaper, and they were talking about these birds that had been blue listed. And they had, they weren't quite on the extinct species list, but they were basically songbirds that were dying. And it was kind of sad to read about that. So I made a painting of the domain of birds, which is the sky, and I penciled on each one of these canvas the name of one of those birds. And I guess my point is, these are kind of painting installations, which I really enjoy doing. So I did sky, I did earth, then I had to do fire. And these are 10 panels that I painted, basically just looking at the tip of a candle. People thought, they were, what are you working on? Oh, I'm working on fire. And they were like, wow, they thought it was going to be like Inferno, big, orange flames. And I chose to use the tip of a candle because of the vulnerability of that, which is also like the vulnerability of life itself, or the spirit that we carry within ourselves. It's such a vulnerable thing. And it's, it can be, or it could be really gentle. And then from there I did the water series. And these are pretty figurative paintings. And you can see up until this point that the scale, like this painting is probably 7 feet tall by like 6.5 feet. The scale of these are pretty big. And they weren't the Agnes Martin idea. It was like hefting these big things around. And the summer of 1993, I suffered a concussion. And I didn't really have the energy to make big paintings for about a year or a year and a half. And I started, thinking about Eddie Barbeau, who had taught me about Ojibwe things, and medicine plants like sage and sweetgrass and the things that people use for cleansing and also for healing. And this is an Ojibwe bandolier bag, which is used to collect medicines. And if you look at it, it's really unique in a way, because it has the entire cycle of the plant on it. It's got the new growth in the spring. It's got, the mature leaves, which are down at the bottom with the berries on them. So it talks about the idea of having a complete cycle of a plant within one image, which to me is really cool, because we can go out and take a photograph or paint a tree or whatever, and we can only do it in present time because it's going to be different the next day, or it's going to be different in 6 months. And it's really hard to figure out, like, how do you get the whole entire thing into one image? So this was the painting that I made when I kind of figured that out. Then from there, I made this one. So you can see that the top left-hand panel is the berry before on its way to ripening, and then the top right would be the mature leaf. The middle left would be the mature berry, and then it would be the spring leaf, and then the bottom left would be the leaf as it started to frost, and then the berry in the process of ripening. This one's a similar idea. And then in 2002, I got approached by Dr. Panza to make, he approached 5 American artists and 1 Italian artist to make these paintings in this Palace Ducal in Sassuolo, Italy. And this is where the royal family lived. It was their living quarters in the back of the palace. And each one had a fresco. Each room had a fresco. And my room was camera fatone, which is the fatone myth is the guy that has a chariot and he pulls the sun across the sky every day. And his boy's like, Dad, I want to do that. I want to do that. No, son, you're not strong enough. Oh, come on, Dad. Whine, 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 whine. Finally, the father gives in to the son, and then the son wrecks. And the sun the sun in the heavens falls to earth and scorches the earth. And it's a big mess. And I said to Dr. Panza, well, how comes I get this room? Because the other ones were like painting, music, dreams, poetry. And he said that the Duke wanted this painted because of the Ottoman Empire trying to come into northern Italy and invade them, and it was a fight between light and darkness, which is pretty cool when you think about it. So I was like, okay. So I started in the south with the white. And then this is the, you can see the top left would be midnight. And then this is working towards the dawn. So they're basically 10 panels that kind of go from, when you look at the sky at noon, it's just like white. You can't see the sun. Everything's just kind of white. And then as the sky changes throughout the day. This is the midnight panel again with twilight on the left and dawn on the right. This painting, I don't know if you guys know, but like in Colorado, all those trees are dying. Have you heard about that? The pine bark beetle? Well, it kind of started in Colorado and it goes all the way to the west. It goes to California, I believe, and Montana is no exception. And where I live where it's very forested, and these beetles came in and they just attacked these lodgepole pines and ponderosa pine trees. And what they do is they lay their larvae into the Cambrium layer of a tree where it does its photosynthesis, It's like if you peel the bark off, there's like a green layer. Well, they destroy that. So you can look at the tree, and it could be on its way to dying, and it takes about 2 years, and then all of a sudden, everywhere you look, these trees are that kind of orange color. That's the upper right. They lose their green needles, and they all die. It's just amazing. So this is my tribute to the lodgepole pine, and the bottom left green would be the healthy needle. The upper left would be bark, and then the sickened tree with the pink needle, and now they're kind of this black color when the pink needle falls off. This one is from the spring of this year, and it's basically from a series called Without Green. And I started, where I live, there's a snow for a really long time, and people are like, oh, the snow, I really miss the green. But if you look around, there's just really beautiful color against that white snow, and that's what this series is about. And there's another one from that series. And then, for the first time in my life, I painted snow. And actually, it's whiter than that, what you see on the screen. And that's it. Well, I don't really consider myself to do true encaustic, because that would be Bryce Martin. Who else uses it? Well, a lot of people use it, but you make a palette over some kind of a heater, like maybe a hot plate or something, of glass. Then you would take different kinds of wax, melt them, and then take a dry pigment and mix it into that wax and apply it onto canvas or panel, whatever. And it's a fairly old method of painting. I think it goes back to the Etruscans, doesn't it? Pretty far. It's pretty old. So what I do is I use kind of the modern method, which is basically I use a traditional painting medium and do my thin to fat, which is the way you're supposed to paint so it doesn't crack. And the wax is pretty fat, so I use that maybe in the last, basically my paintings are probably like 30 layers of paint. So on the last 5 layers, I'll add what is a wax paste. So it's kind of a melted wax and solvent so that it can just be mixed in. It's pretty easy to use. Does that answer it? Anybody else? Because I've been painting this way for, 20, 30 years or whatever. If I were to take a painting, okay, that's a perfect example. See how the screen has that line that goes right through that painting? Okay, it's basically a color field painting, if you want to call it that. I don't know what to call it. But if I were to take a pencil, like Agnes Martin, and draw a line right across that, to me, that line becomes a figure on a ground. I mean, there's actually more of a relationship between figure and ground. No, they wouldn't be as figurative, because they don't really have, there's a relationship between ground, and a relationship between panel and panel that make a whole, but there's not really any figures in them. It's like this, if this didn't have the line there, it would be like a blank, it would be like a stage. Then the line comes walking out, and there's the figure on the stage. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Do you ever incorporate any materials from the trees or botanicals into your...
I don't, but like basic painting materials are from trees. Like Damar varnish is from a tree. Turpentine is made in part from a tree. Cotton, linen.
You apply these layers with brush?
Yeah. Uh-huh. I use a house painter's brush. Anyone else? It's probably better to look at the paintings in the gallery, or yeah, because if you go in there, you'll see if you look at the edge, oftentimes the edge will be either red or green, and then the top color might be the opposite. It's kind of, in nature, if you look at things in the springtime, when they come up, when things first come up, they're often red. Or if you plant a seed in the garden, when it first comes up, the stem is often red. And then the whole thing turns green. And then when it starts to kind of die or decay, then it kind of starts going back to red again. So to me, those two colors kind of imply the natural cycle of a plant. And I'm kind of fascinated by that because I think that the annual cycle of a plant is kind of a reflection of the human cycle that might happen in 100 years as opposed to the annual cycle. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's kind of like, I see it kind of as a metaphor. Anyone else? Yes. Oh, I think, I just had enough experience with the night, I don't really work from photographs with any of these things. I just try to observe the world that we live in, and then we all do that. And then you have a poignant moment. Wow, look at that, and it stays with you. It becomes part of you, and I guess that's what I'm trying to do, is to capture that kind of those moments and the beauty of things, and then try to translate it the best way I know how, through not just the thing I saw, but the way it made me feel. Any other questions? When I showed the four, did you see the first 4 directions with the circle in them? Okay. I was kind of concentrating on this. I didn't even know you were late. I think that I don't need to do it with the square, because I think if I paint these things in the right way, it will be implied. And I think that probably for a lot of people, they look at these panels and they think, oh, there's no composition in them. But I think there is. I think there has to be some kind of a composition in order for the panels to interrelate to one another, because if they were all just like centered, boom, 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 it wouldn't be, it wouldn't be very interesting. I think they'd be more stagnant. So I do consciously try to paint that, whether the orb is, more this way or that way or whatever, so that that these are interesting and that they have relationship with one another. I think it's really interesting because I think that you can look at something like this, and then the first thing that we do in our mind is like, okay, how are these things related? Oh, I like that panel, but no, the color of that one's better than that one. And we do this thing where we try to organize it and somehow try to make sense of it and explain it. I just think it's our human nature to do that. And then what I'm hoping that happens is, the mind does that, and pretty soon it just kind of settles in and goes, oh, it's just one thing. It's not these separate little things, it's just one thing. Anyone else? I think that if they were circles, I think it would be just too obvious. It would be too, I don't know. I think it would just be too, what's the word I'm looking for? Trite. It would be too easy. I think it would really change the way the things relate to one another. Anybody else? Yeah. It's really crazy being a painter, because it's like you're in this studio by yourself, and then I'm developing this whole kind of weird vocabulary that's it's like my vocabulary, my language, but it's not really a language. It's more of a, like working with these invisible things that are like essences, which I guess all painting is. I mean, I think it's kind of like alchemy in a sense. So like when I was talking about the figure thing, that's part of that. And a lot of these, like the small linear things to me are more like a landscape. And if you look at the title, these are like if you walked along a river. And these would be the things that you might see when you walk that path. Whereas the other ones, like chokecherry, is just one tree and it's kind of stacked. Does that make sense? It's just my own little, like my own little signifiers and codes. Anyone else? Yeah. It's just basically the bark, which is really hard to paint, the trunk of the tree, and then the leaf in 2 different stages or 2 different times of the year. So to me, it kind of encapsulates pretty much the whole cycle of it. There could be another panel, to do like another green in it, but basically it has the, the trunk year-round, and then it has the green leaf, and then it has the yellow leaf, and then you're back just to the trunk, right? Any other questions? Yeah, sometimes. Not very often, though. I have to be really present with it because, as I said earlier, they're usually, I would say, in between 20 and 30 layers of paint that I've built up so that you can kind of feel. For example, if I was going to paint a summer green leaf, say there's 6 panels and one's going to be the summer green leaf, or like the Wichita elm, I'd start with almost, when the trees in the springtime come out and they have the buds on them and they're red or orange before that leaf opens up, I'd start with that color. And then I would go to what I call screamin' spring green, which is, the unfurling period of the tree, and then move to get that dark green. So if I, make a mistake and I'm not patient and I push it and I go from the orange to the screaming green and then I put a really dark green on top of that and I kill that, then I'm in trouble. Anybody else? Yeah, I live out in the Boondocks. So, and I really enjoy it. I'm just astounded by the beauty. Anyone else? Yes. Mostly it's from memory. Sometimes when I'm, out, I'll find something and I'll just be, wow, how did that happen? Something that you would never, imagine to be there, and then I'll look at it for a while. Anyone else? Thank you.